how to make the Large Owl Applique from Kreative Kiwi. For this I'm going to be using a 5x7 hoop, 2 layers of washaway stabiliser per hooping, and there are 2 hoopings, a selection of threads, masking tape, some pins to secure my stabiliser to the hoop, my squizzers and my fabrics and batting cut to size. Today I want to show you something a little bit different. I want to show you how, with a little bit of forethought and planning, you can change the order that you stitch things in to personalise a design. And when I mean personalise, I'm going to be creating this owl and using it as a mobile. So I want the back to look different to the front, as you would expect on a bird. So just by going through the instructions, you pick out the order that things are done in. And with this owl, the backing is put on right at the beginning. When you have backing that's put on very early, anything that comes after, or is stitched after should I say, is going to show both back and front. So I've gone through the instructions and I've decided where I want to put my, or should I say when I'm going to put my backing fabric down. And we're going to be skipping back and forth through the stitch colours. So if you don't know how to do that on your machine, it's a really handy thing to learn. So have a look in your instruction manual, or find a video on YouTube for your machine on how to do that. So once you've read through the instructions and look at the image of what you're stitching out, all this detail that you see on the chest, on the head, around the eyes, is going to be the same both sides. As I don't want that, I'm going to be adding the backing later, but I also have to decide what I want showing from the front on the back. And I've decided that I want the feet and I want the wing detail showing. So I've rearranged the order of things for that to happen. Now you can't do this on every design, let's be clear on that, but you can usually find out which designs you can and can't do this on. So what I've done is, I'm just going to move that up a little bit. For my first hooping, which is going to be the body, my first stitch colour is going to be the placement outline, as always. Round number 2 is going to be the batting stitch down. Colour number 3 is going to be the wing fabric stitch down. Then I'm going to skip number 4 because 4 is the feet, and I want the feet to come after the backing, and here's why. So this is the front of the design. Turn it over. If I put the feet on before they wouldn't be seen, and I also need to make sure that when I add my fabric for the feet, that I do it both back and front, otherwise I'm going to have backing fabric showing through on the feet. So the feet come later on. Instead of the feet, I'm going to do the body fabric stitch down, which is colour number 5. Then colour number 7 is going to be this satin stitch detail on the chest. So rather than after, I want that before, because that's going to be covered up, because I don't want it on the back. Then after that, I'm going to add my backing fabric, and I'm going to use colour number 2. I could use colour number 1 or 2 to stitch this down. Then after that, we're going to add the fabric for the feet, and I'm going to do that both back and front of the hoop, and colour number 4 will then stitch that down. Then we're going to trim everything up and do the zigzag stitching around the raw edges. And then colours 8, 9 and 10 are all the satin stitch detail that you see around the edge of the feet, the wings, the body, etc. On the second hooping number 2, let's move that over a little bit, that's better. We're going to do the placement outline, as always, the batting stitch down, then it's going to be the main head fabric stitched down with colour number 2 again after the batting. Then colour number 3 is the fabric that goes around the eyes. Then colour number 4 we're going to skip because that's the zigzag stitching around all the raw edges, so we don't need that just now. Then I'm going to go to colour number 5, which will be the beak, and all these details on the face I want hidden. So then it's the head satin stitch detail, which is the markings on top of the head there. Then we'll have the eye satin stitching, which is what goes around the fabric of the eyes there. Then we'll have colour number 10, because we've got to do put the eyes on before we put the backing as well, which will be the white of the eyes. Colour 11 will be the outside of the eyes. Colour 12 will be the shading of the eyes. Colour 13, the black of the eyes. So that's all the eyes detail taken care of. Then we're going to trim everything up. And no, we're not. We're going to turn the hoop over and we're going to add our backing fabric. Then we're going to stitch colour 1 to secure it to the hoop. After that we're going to trim everything up, and then we're going to jump back to colour 4 to do the zigzag stitching of the raw edges. Then we're going to jump forward to colour number 8 and we're going to add the body to the head and join it with a zigzag stitching of colour 8. And then finally we're going to be doing colour number 9, and that's going to do the satin stitching around the head, and that's going to hide all the works. You're going to start off by hooping your 2 layers of washaway stabiliser. And now we're going to pin around the edge of our hoop, and that will stop our stabiliser from being pulled down between the 2 pieces. So I'm going to take a pin, any pin will do with a head, rest it on top of your inner hoop, push it through the stabiliser and then bring it back round and through. And that now anchors the stabiliser, and you're going to do that on all 4 sides. The larger the hoop, the more pins that you use. Load file 1 into your machine. I've loaded my neutral thread into my machine, and we're now going to stitch round number 1. I've put a piece of paper underneath my outline so that you can see it. You're now going to place your batting over the top and tape it down. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2 to secure it. We're now going to trim up the excess batting. Next, you're going to place your wing fabric over the outline and tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 3 to secure them. I'm now going to trim up around this area of the wings. Next, rather than put the fabric for the feet down, I'm going to be placing the fabric for the body down, and then I'm going to be stitching round number 5. So I'm going to place my fabric for the body over the outline and then tape it in place. I'm going to put my hoop into my machine. I'm now going to go into the stitch and colour settings of my machine, and that's this needle plus and minus icon here. So I'm going to press that, and that brings me to this panel. The cotton reel looking icons are for skipping through colours backwards and forwards. There's the cotton reel with the minus for going back and the plus for going forward. So I'm going to go to colour 5, so I'm going to press the plus, and then so that my needle is in position to start, I'm just going to press the needle icon with the +1, and that's going to advance my embroidery arm to the start position. And I'm now going to stitch round number 5 to secure my fabric to the hoop. Before I add my backing fabric, I'm going to trim up the excess from around the body. I'm now going to do the stitch detail on the chest here. I've loaded my thread for that into my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 7. So back to my cotton reel with the plus, and I'm just going to press that until I get to number 7. And there we are, and that's what it's going to stitch. I pressed the +1 on the needle icon to arrive at the start point, and I'm now going to stitch round number 7. Next I'm going to be adding the backing fabric to the body of the owl. So I want to stitch that down with colour number 2. So I'm now going to go back through the colours with the cotton reel with the minus to colour number 2. Okay, so there it is, and that's what it's going to stitch out. So I'm going to turn my hoop over and place my fabric over the outline and tape it in place. I'm going to pop my hoop back into my machine and stitch round number 2. The next colour on my list is for stitching the fabric for the feet down, and that's colour number 4. So I'm now going to advance through with the plus cotton reel to colour number 4. And there we are there, and that's where it's going to stitch down. And I'm also going to press the +1 on my stitch to bring the arm of my embroidery machine into position to start. I'm going to start by adding my fabrics to the back. I'm going to place it over each of the feet and tape it in place. You can put it in one strip if you wanted to, the fabric. I'm using up scraps, so that's why I'm doing it in pieces. So I'm now going to turn my hoop over and do the same on the front. I'm now going to pop my hoop into my machine and stitch round number 4 to secure it. After I have trimmed up all the excess fabric from my hoop, I will then want to zigzag all the raw edges, and that is colour number 6. So I'm going to advance from here to colour number 6, so the cotton reel with the plus, and there we are, and that's what it's going to stitch next. So I can now press the +1 on the needle, and when I load my hoop into my machine, it will be in the start position for colour number 6. So let's get this trimmed up both back and front, and I'm going to start on the back. I often get asked why the back first. The simple answer is because it's easy to forget. Okay, I'm now going to pop my hoop into my machine and stitch round number 6. The next colour that I'm going to stitch is colour 8, and that's going to do the satin stitching around the body part. For the next colours, I'm going to have a matching bobbin in my machine because it's going to be all satin stitching from now on. So I'm going to advance to colour 8, so back to my cotton reel with the plus, and that's colour 8, and that's what it's going to stitch. And then I'm going to press the +1 so that it's in the start position. So with the matching bobbin and thread for the body in my machine, I'm now going to stitch colour number 8. Load your thread colour for the wings into your machine along with a matching bobbin if appropriate, and then you're going to stitch round number 9, and that's going to do the satin stitching around the wings. And the last colour to stitch is colour number 10, and that's going to do the satin stitching around the feet. And that's the body of the owl complete. That's the front, and there's the back. We're now going to free this from the hoop, so I'm going to do that from the back and just trim around the edge, taking care not to cut the stitching. There's one more little job to do, and that's to trim close to the stitch line here, because that's going to be our join, so we don't want too much bulk around here, otherwise it's going to show through when we join this to the head. And that's our body complete. You're going to start off by hooping and pinning your 2 layers of wash away stabiliser as you did before. Load file number 2 into your machine, which is the head of course, And then you're going to stitch round number 1, which is the placement outline for your batting. I've put a piece of paper underneath my hoop so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to place my batting over the outline, and then I'm going to tape it in place. Pop your hoop into your machine and stitch round number 2. Trim away the batting, or should I say the excess batting. I'm now going to place the fabric for the head over the outline. And tape it in place. Then we're going to stitch round number 2 again. So back to my cotton reel with the minus. Change it to stitch colour number 2, and that's where it's going to stitch. I'm now going to press the +1 button for the needle for it to advance 1 stitch. And I'm now ready to stitch it. Next we're going to place the eye fabric over the outline and tape it in place. We're now going to stitch round number 3, and that's going to secure it to the hoop. We're now going to skip to colour 5, and then we're going to stitch the beak. So on my plus cotton reel, up to colour 5, and there's the beak. I'm now going to advance with the embroidery arm, and we're ready to stitch. Before we go any further, we're going to trim up the excess fabric from around the eyes. And we can now stitch colour number 5. Make sure you've got an appropriate colour loaded into your machine for the beak. Change your thread colour for whichever colour you want for the satin stitch detail on top of the head, and then you're going to stitch round number 6. Load your thread colour for the satin stitching around the edge of the eyes, and then you're going to stitch round number 7. The next colour that we're going to stitch is the white of the eyes, so we're now going to advance to colour 10. So we're on 8 at the moment, 9, 10, and advance the embroidery arm. Load your white thread into your machine and then stitch round number 10. Change your thread colour to whichever you want for the colour of the eyes, and then we're going to stitch round number 11. Load an appropriate colour for the shading of the colour of the eyes into your machine, and then stitch round number 12. Next is the black of the eyes, so load an appropriate colour into your machine and then stitch round number 13. Now that all the facial features are stitched, we can now add the backing. So turn your hoop over and place your backing fabric over the outline and then tape it in place. As we've just stitched colour 13, your machine will automatically go back to colour 1 once you've finished stitching it. So we're now going to stitch colour 1 to secure the backing onto the hoop. Load your thread colour that you're going to use for the satin stitching around the edge of the head into your machine, and then stitch round number 1 to secure the batting, to the back of your hoop. We're now going to trim up the excess fabric both back and front of our hoop. So starting with the back. We're now going to stitch colour number 4, and that's going to do the zigzagging around the raw edges. So we're on 2, so I'm going to click forward 2, 3, 4, and that's round number 4, and advance 1 stitch. We're now on colour number 4, that's where it's going to stitch. If you have a look up here where it shows us what it's going to stitch out, there's actually zigzagging around the eye pieces. We don't want to stitch those because otherwise that's going to stitch over the top of the satin stitch that we've already got in place. So we're going to advance through the stitches until it jumps to the outside stitch. So I'm going to start off with a plus 100, so that'll jump forward 100 stitches, and then I'm going to carry on between these three, the 100, the 10 and the 1, until I find the right place, and if it goes too far then I will use the minus. So already it's jumped from here to here with that plus 100, and I think we're probably going to do another 100 to get round to here. So that's jumped, and we can now carry on as normal with the stitching. Just make sure that you've got your the right thread colour in your machine for the satin stitching, and if appropriate a matching bobbin. The next colour that we're going to stitch will be the join, and that's going to be colour number 8. So we're going to advance through the colours from 5 to 8. 6, 7, 8, and I'm just going to press the +1 stitch, and I'm now in the right place to start stitching my join in a minute. We're now going to join the body to the head. I'm going to turn this around here so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to line this stitch line here up on top of this stitch line here between the two ends of the zigzag stitching. I'm going to turn this around this way so that I can see what I'm doing while I line it up. And then we're going to secure it in place, and I'm going to use a couple of pins. If you use pins, keep them right out of the way of your stitch line. They can do some damage to your machine if you're not careful. And we're now going to stitch colour number 8, and that's going to zigzag along this join. You're now going to check the alignment to make sure that you're happy with it. If you are, you're going to go on and stitch colour 9. If you're not, unpick it and restitch colour 8 again. Now going to stitch colour 9, and that's going to do the satin stitching all the way around the outside of the head. I've had to stop my machine due to a needle break. My top thread got caught up in the thread mechanism and it broke the needle. So I've changed the needle, but it caused a tear in my stabilizer. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of scrap stabilizer up, and I've stuck it down on top, and then just take a glue stick, put a bit on top, and just make sure that it's going to stay in place. It's important that we have got stabilizer for the satin stitch because obviously it supports the stitching. So I'm going to give that a few minutes just to dry, and then I'm going to back up my stitching to here, which is where it seemed to go all pear-shaped. Okay, so I've gone back 20-30 stitches, and I'm now going to carry on where I left off. And that's the stitching of our owl complete. We can now free this from the hoop, so turn it over. Where we stuck the, or should I say where I stuck the extra stabilizer on, I'm just going to trim around there. Taking care, of course, not to cut my stitching. I'm going to do the same here. What I don't get off because it's stuck down onto the fabric will wash off when I remove the excess stabilizer in a minute. Okay, so I'm now going to trim this out, taking care, of course, not to cut the stitching and not to cut this piece underneath. And that here's where my tear was, and had I just left that, it would have caused a problem with the stitching. All the stitching would have pulled inwards. Okay. All that remains for us to do now is to get rid of all the excess stabiliser from around the edge, and we're going to do that with some warm water and a cotton bud. Okay, so I've got my glass of warm water, and I'm just going to start on the back here where I patched this. And I've got not only the stabiliser but the glue as well to melt away here. And that's our owl complete. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of new videos as soon as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's always lots of ideas, help and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me.